Good morning and welcome to another FasTrax webinar. This is a weekly session we do every week at 9 Central, 10 Eastern on Fridays. You can see all the past events as well as upcoming events if you go to goftx.com, choose the FTx Lifeline tab, scroll down a bit to where you hit the middle of the page. You see the webinars section, choose that View Webinars button. And then this page will show you all the previous webinars, where you can view their recordings, as well as at the bottom, all of the upcoming webinars where you can register. This week's will be utilizing the return forms option in both POS and Director. The return forms option is a fantastic way to keep track of returns down to the customer level. What customers return what? What's the reason? We'll first look at a return without return forms enabled. So we're going to choose the POS icon to open up the point of sale. We're going to take a look at that. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to do a return. So I'm going to open the POS up. I'm going to choose Item Return, start that return process, enter in an item, subtotal it out, cash it out. Now, I can simply see that this was a return if I look at the receipt, or if I look at the reports on this, and I can see that it was cashed out, but I don't know who did that return. I just know that transaction is a return. So if I want to get down to see who does what returns, I need to enable the return forms option. To do that, in the POS, I will log into a person who has permission to change the POS settings. I will choose Actions. I will choose Settings, and then the Register Settings area. We'll see there's a box here, a checkbox for Use Return Forms. I'm going to check that and choose Save. The next thing I'll do is enable the same thing in Director. So I will log in with someone who has permission to change settings. I will choose the Settings hyperlink at the bottom right corner. And to get to that, I have to make sure that not only do they have to have permission, they have to be an administrator. So I'll go to Maintenance, Logins, and when I look at this user, I can see that they are indeed an admin. So I'm going to choose the Settings and Enable Return Forms. In Director, we can see this area. If we go to the Maintenance module, we use these little arrows to scroll over, and there's a Return Forms section that's now enabled in Maintenance. So let's do a return in the POS and see how this process has changed. I'm going to log in, open the POS up, and I'm going to choose the same return button. So return, and then now we have this screen here. Now I have to actually input a customer now to proceed with the return process. So I can search for customers by a license number, a last name, or a phone number. If I just hit the Find button without populating any data, it's going to do a wildcard search. So I'm going to choose myself here. Next area is the return notes. I have to input a reason why the customer is doing a return. I'm going to just put damaged product. Choose OK. I'm going to manually return an item. Input that item number. Subtotal it out and cash the transaction out. So how does this look in Director? Let's go to Director. I'm going to refresh that module. Go back to my return forms. There I am. We can see the last activity was today. I'm going to view this. And there's that return we just done for $10.03. So let's go back to the POS. Let's try this without a customer. I'm going to do a return. And I don't have a customer. I'm just going to hit the OK button. I get an error message. I absolutely have to have a customer on the transaction to do a return. So with this enabled, you have to have a customer before you can proceed with the return. So let's add a new customer. I'm going to choose New, and then I have to input their information. We're going to add in John Doe, his phone number, And if I try saving it, I need a license number. So I'm going to input a license number. Now, technically, this is all the information that I need to proceed with the return. However, if I ever want to block this customer from doing a return, I need to have the rest of this data populated, the address, city, state, and zip code. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to put in information here. I'm going to save that, and then I can proceed. Let's say that I don't want to put in return notes. If I choose OK, I get a message on here, returns require notes. So you have to have some kind of note for that return. And I'm going to return that same item. We'll subtotal that out. We can go back to director. We can refresh this module and then take a look at that transaction. We can see that now there is John Doe in here. And whenever we double click in, we can see there's his return. Now, we're going to go look at the blocking returns for specific customers. So this checkbox here, if I check that and I choose save, let's try the return process with John Doe again and see if he can do a return. I'm doing the item return. I'm going to do a wildcard search. There's John. I'm going to choose him and OK. And then we get the error message, no returns are allowed. So as long as that checkbox is checked under John Doe, he cannot do a return. The only way he can do a return is if that checkbox is altered and it's now unchecked. So we're going to go back to that. We're going to view him. We're going to uncheck that, save, and then try a return. Here's my wildcard search. There's John Doe. And then we can start the process. I'm going to do the return now and finish that transaction out. Okay. So let's try blocking returns under the other customer, me. We will view this. Notice there's no address, city, state, or zip. I'm going to choose the deny returns and save. And then I get an error message, invalid address. Until I actually populate this data, whether it be on the POS at the time of the transaction or here in Director, you cannot deny returns. So it's best practice to go ahead at the time of entering in the customer at the point of sale to enter in everything. That way, if you ever need to block the transaction for any kind of returns for that specific customer, you can. You don't have to worry about that having incomplete data. Now, if you don't have that data and you want to block, then there's really two ways to do that. One, you can key in incorrect information and save it. Two, you can wait until the next time that customer comes in, key in their data, and then the next time they try to return, you can block it. Or C, you just can't do it at all. So in my mind, it's always best practice to just go ahead and at the time of the transaction, the very first time they're being entered, put in all of that data. All right, so let's go ahead and let's create a new customer. I'm going to choose return. I'm going to choose new. So let's say Jane Doe comes in. And I choose save. I need the license number. You can't forget that. So I'm going to go ahead and put in her information. It's best practice. And there's the C. We're going to go ahead and put in phone number 2. I want to key in the reason. do my return and cash that out. Okay, so we've seen adding customers, altering customers' data, and then doing a return without a receipt. Let's do a return with a receipt. So I'm going to rig up a transaction. I'm going to do an item kit master, which is in this case a sandwich. I'm going to do the level 1 item, the level 2 item, and the level 3 item. I'm going to buy a pack of Marlboros and a jewel. And let's go ahead and add in a pack of Winstons. And notice what happens whenever I add this Winston in, when I choose the subtotal button. I'm getting my upload prompt. We did a previous webinar on this, and it's a fantastic selling tool to help cashiers and customers be aware of all potential loyalty campaigns, system discounts, promotions, anything you want to have as a notification to make sure that everyone knows what's going on in your store you can do with uplifts. I highly recommend you watch that video because you can see the power and how it's just a very effective sales tool. We're going to cash that out. So we can look at that receipt number now. There's that receipt. It's receipt number 39. I'm going to do a return now. I'm going to do my wildcard search. I'm going to do that under myself. I'm going to do my receipt number. And then notice I get this screen. This is going to be the screen that shows every item that was on that transaction that's eligible for return and the price that the customer paid. So let's say they only want to return this one item. You just choose that. Notice it gets the checkbox filled in. You know that that item is being returned. I can choose an additional item too and have multiple items returned in the same transaction. So I'm going to choose return, verify that, and then continue the transaction. All right, so now let's go back to Director. Let's refresh that module. We can see there's our 3 customers. I will choose myself, and then there's that transaction we just returned. Now notice on the screen below the customer details, you can see like when the customer was added, what store they were at, what cashier added them, and then the last activity. What store were they last at, what register, what receipt, and what amount. Then you have the lifetime activity. How many total returns has this customer done and for what total value has been returned? We'll go ahead and close that. And we're going to look at whenever we choose the print button, it's going to print out a list of our return customers. You can see a list of every one of your customers that have ever had a return. Next, we're going to look at their transactions tab. This tab basically lists out every single return that's been done. You'll see the date of the transaction, the store, the register number, the receipt number, the amount, the first and last name, the employee, and the reason why that product was returned on that transaction. If we choose the View button, we're going to get the negative cashier report for that specific transaction. We can see here there's the negative cashier report. If you're unaware of the negative cashier report, it is a fantastic report to look at what we call negative actions. A negative action in our world is going to be a void, a cancel, a return, or a no sale. Anything that has a negative value on a transaction. Those are of particular interest because generally, if one person has a lot of these, it can potentially lead to they're trying to cover something up, shrink, theft, however you want to look at that. It's not a good thing to have that many negative transactions in a specific time frame. You can utilize this button here to see the pre and post receipts. So the receipt before, leading up to that transaction, and the receipt after. If I choose that, we can see we've not done a transaction after, so we're only going to see the pre-receipt, the sale of that item. If I choose a transaction that is like this one, and I view, we will have a pre and post receipt. There's another return, and then there's that sale before we did the return on receipt number 40. You can always view the full negative cash report if you go to the report section, sales reports, and then choose the negative cashier report. And you can run this by store, by cashier, by day range. There's also the negative item report, which is very similar. It will show basically negative item details. Let's go back to our maintenance and our return forms and our transactions. So let's say we want to filter this screen here. We only want to see data for a specific customer or a specific time frame. How do we do that? Because whenever we choose the print button, it's going to print all those transactions out, that transaction log. Well, there's a filter button here. This will let you filter transactions between a certain time frame. It'll let you filter by a license number, a first name, a last name, a store number, register number, receipt number, a return amount that is a greater than, less than, or equal to value, and the employee number. So if I want to see every transaction on this log that's done by Derek, when I apply that, I see just Derek's transactions. And then I can print just his transactions. If I want to see just James, when I apply that, I'm filtered to just James' transactions. So this is a great way to filter down to, if you want to basically look at individual customers and a list of their returns without actually going to the customer themselves here. You can kind of use this in conjunction with the customer itself to determine, does the customer need to have a deny return put in place on them? All right, so that covers the return form usage, both utilizing it and enabling it in the point of sale and director. I hope everybody learned something today. If you have any questions on this, you can always contact us at 256-319-3470, option 1 for the technical support team, as well as web support at FasTraxPOS.com. Always remember, if you go to our website at goftx.com, you can choose the Lifeline tab, and you can view all of our documentation and videos. For example, if I wanted to look at the document on return forms, I would just simply choose that documentation. I can do a search for return, and then there's the return forms, all the documentation on that. Same with the videos, so I can choose the videos tab and go and view videos on that. Remember to sign up for our next webinars. Next week's webinar will be utilizing the second level of AdPro 201. So thank you so much for joining, and we will see you next week.